what's the weather like? You're in St. John's, right?
Yeah, I am. It's very overcast. Looks kind of foggy, a little bit damp. Not
Ah,
pleasant for a Monday morning.
yeah, same as here. Yeah, we've had some great weather though. It's been fantastic out here. Yesterday it was sunny and bright, and the day before it was up in the 20s. Oh, actually, I think it hit 30 the day before. So we've had
Amazing.
really nice weather. A little bit up and down though since September came, but still getting some good days. So this one's a little cloudy and overcast. This looks like St. John's at my
Yeah.
window now. Yeah, we're in a sunny place. So anyway, we're here to talk about your photography, which I am completely enamored of. So you have been, how long have you been a photographer?
That's a bit of a loaded question. I think every photographer struggles with the day they became a photographer.
Right.
I've had a camera in my hand, I guess, as long as I can remember. And I've been doing self-portraits since I was a youngster. So I don't know, I guess I officially called myself a photographer about 10 years ago.
Right. Well, I think you can, yeah. You could definitely call yourself a photographer now. I've looked at your work. And so you do you do some traditional photography. You shoot weddings and things like that, right?
Yeah, I take on a handful of weddings a year. I still do like engagement shoots and the odd family portrait, stuff like that. But my heart lies with the artsy-fartsy stuff. So
Yeah, and it's the artsy-fartsy stuff that I wanted to talk about. So you do some really interesting work. I can't say that I've seen anything like it. I I don't know. So I'm going to ask you to explain what you do, if you don't mind, what your and I will, and of course for the people listening, uh, the sorry about that. The um, there will be some visual that you can check out on website and Facebook. So, but yeah, just tell us a little bit about what your art photography is about and what that entails.
okay. Well, I focus primarily on, I guess, self-portraiture. Not because I don't like other people, just because I have crazy ideas and people aren't always available. And I don't know, I've taken to using myself as a means of, I don't know, I guess getting an idea out there without words. You can probably tell I'm really bad at putting words together.
Does it?
So it's easier for me to get an idea across with visuals. So I dress up like a crazy lady every weekend and come up with a crazy idea in my head and make it a reality.
I know. So for people listening, what Kit does is her photos have props in them. They're very fantasy based. I've seen unicorns and mermaids and all sorts of creatures of fantasy, or maybe not, portrayed in them against beautiful natural landscape. You do a lot of outdoor shoots and with props and that sort of thing, and it's all you in the photo. The person in the photo is you, not a model of other than you. You're a model, obviously, but and it's just really interesting. They're very thought provoking. It's not like you just go there and stand there. It's like something's going on, and it's very interpretive. And we'll get to that interpretive. Interpretive, is that the right word? We'll get to that
Yeah.
part a little bit later because we'll talk about that with regard to the project you have. So why did you do it? And I wanted to point out you don't use any Photoshop, right? This is all real.
No, I never really learned Photoshop as a kid. I could use the clone stamp tool growing up, and that was about as far as my knowledge went. So when I'm doing my editing, I edit in a project or a program called Lightroom, which is a branch off of Photoshop, but it's really just about adjusting colors and tones and stuff like that. So anything you see in my photos is absolutely 110% in front of me.
Right. Yeah. And for anybody, Photoshop, basically, you can insert things into a photo or take things out or, change the photo in some way, add a person, take a person out. Lightroom is just a post-production program where you would just, like you said, change the lighting or the coloring of
Mm-hmm.
it. So Photoshop
Yeah.
is the one where you see, someone puts a monster in the middle of St. John's. That's Photoshop. That's
Yes, that
when you
would be a
see,
Photoshop job.
yeah. Um, and people often get accused. I know that the icebergs, people take photos of these icebergs and they're massive, and people get accused of it actually being photoshopped, which it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Icebergs are really massive,
No.
and that's kind of what Photoshop is. It's like you're kind of faking it a little bit. Your stuff's really real. Like you've built, and you build the props yourself.
I can't take all the credit. My boyfriend Drew is sort of my master builder when it comes to a lot of the bigger jobs. There's a couple of props that I have done myself and I'm super proud of. There's a few that we've collaborated on, and there's a few that I've washed my hands up and just said, "This is what I need. This is how big I want it. Go."
Okay, so you have
So he
some
figures it out.
assistance with that. And so, do you have like a truck? Because some of these things look fairly big too. Like I've seen doors and.
Yeah, I have a friend with a truck. I
Okay.
have parents with an SUV, and I have a lot of burly friends who, if it's not too far, will help me just carry stuff down the road.
Right. And so, where do you shoot? Do you have favorite places, or it's all general the same area?
I have a couple of secret spots within about 20 minutes of each other. They're not around my house. I currently live near Bannerman, and I usually travel further than Bannerman to get stuff done. But there's a couple of go-to spots, and then I like kind of exploring and finding new places as well. So it's always an adventure.
Yeah, and another thing that it's you, it's you. So, self-portrait, which I don't know that I've seen a lot. Like people do that on occasion, but in this case, it's all they continue in some fashion. And how does that? Because I'm trying to word this question right. How much of you goes into your art? Of course, for most of us, there's some of us we have to put ourselves into our art, but for you, it's actually physically you into your art. How
Yeah.
difficult is that for you? Because for us, as like I'm a writer, so you're putting your own stuff on. It's kind of personal, and you're putting it out there in the
Hmm.
public. How much does that play into what you do? Is it uncomfortable? Is it something you're just like, oof, I'm just doing it, or how does that work for you?
It was weird at first for sure, especially like as you said, there's not much of it going around, especially locally, where people do a lot of this stuff. So it's kind of weird to be like, oh, I'm not a vain person. This is how I'm expressing. So I don't know. I'd say there's at least 110% of me that goes into every photo. Um, it's usually like a week long prep process where I'll, start like Monday and Tuesday fabricating an idea, and Wednesday it'll be like sketch day, or okay, figure out what materials we need for the props that we have to build, and we're kind of figuring out locations from there, and then it's like Sunday is shoot day, like always. So no matter what the weather is, it's a go, and I don't know, it's sort of taken over my life a little bit. So
Yeah, it would have
uh,
to. And looking at these photos, I mean, there's a lot. It's complicated to me. Um, and I do a little bit of photography. So and of course you must use timer, remote control because you're in the photo.
yes, I've got a pretty wicked remote trigger that helps me out. It's good for like 100 meters, so I can set the camera up and run away and not worry about it.
Oh, that's wonderful because I just have one of those little tiny ones that I have to actually be standing there pointing it at the thing. I can't be.
Yes,
Yeah,
started with one of those.
yeah, that would be very frustrating. So you have a lot of equipment. You've invested in a lot of um, camera equipment and lenses and different things, and it's obvious from the work that you have good equipment.
Mhm.
Um, Now let's talk about the project that I think it's almost completed and ready to be published. Um,
Yeah.
which, well, why don't you just tell us what it is?
Okay. Well, Engen Books approached me last year, I think it was. They were super interested in my work, and we had worked together on a couple of projects before. And they were like, "Hey, we should do a photo book because your stuff is awesome, and we need to get it out there." And I'm like, "Oh, that sounds kind of fun. Sure." So thus started the baby, the Artography, as it is so lovingly called. And we sort of took it and ran with it. We picked out a bunch of photos that I had done in the past that they super enjoyed and I enjoyed. And then we decided to get creative with it and wanted to involve some of the writing community. So we would post up a photograph, and we'd get people to write like a short story based on that photograph. And then we had a panel of judges that would vote on the story. And then those winning stories are actually going to be featured in the book alongside the images as well. So it's kind of inclusive, which is cool.
Yeah, it was a very interesting project because I didn't know there was a book coming, but being involved in the writing community, I'd seen the photographs and the contest. I actually entered once, didn't win. Flash fiction, well, I mean, it's crazy. They were getting, 30, 40 submissions for every, and I'm not a flash fiction writer. And for anybody listening who doesn't understand what flash fiction is, it's very short fiction, 250, 300, maybe 500 words tops. I think these competitions were at the 250 level. So you're writing a story. You have to kind of portray with a little bit of an arc to the story, and they would be inspired by the photograph of the day or of the month or whatever. So these contests were going on over time, and I found them very interesting because people would announce that they'd won, and so you get to learn who the writers are out around, and there's so many. And of course, the entrants were all over Canada. It wasn't just a Newfoundland or St. John's project.
No, it wasn't limited.
Yeah, so it really sort of, I found that the part that I liked about that was started to find a writing community within Canada that does some flash fiction and entered. And so the book itself has, I don't know how many stories. It has a lot. Do you know the number?
I did. I can't remember. We've added a couple since I knew before. So there is a bunch, though. It's a good amount.
Yeah, I think the book's 100 pages. I think I read that. And so it would have one of your photos, and then that photo would be accompanied by a piece of fiction inspired by the photograph by one of the writers who won the competition, or other writers that were invited to be a part of it for whatever reason as well. So it's a combination. It has writing and your photography.
Yeah, it's a super power.
And you were a judge on these stories, am I correct?
I had my say on a couple.
Okay.
First going off before life got too hectic, I was going through. We got basically we would be sent the list of stories with no names attached, nothing like that. It was just this is the title, this is the story, and we had to rate them, our favorites, like our top 10 picks. And it was so hard. It was so hard because they were all so good.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. So were you surprised by what people pulled out of your photo to create a story?
In some cases, yes. Just because, of course, when I'm shooting it, I have, a sort of idea in my head, and I'm like, okay, this is what I want to portray for me. But I always like to leave my photos pretty open-ended and more on the conceptual side, so people can sort of take away what they like. So in some cases, I was pretty, I don't know, I guess I wasn't really surprised by some. I was like, this is pretty much exactly what I was going for. But then there was those others that were the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and I'm like, whoa, like that didn't even occur to me, and now this photo is so much more intense, and it's crazy.
I entered one contest, and I also have a story in the book that I was asked to write after, and I found in writing it, I'm going to talk to other people who have stories in the book over the next couple of weeks. Oops. Sorry, I just had a notification. And I am going to talk to it, but what I found is that the photos were so inspiring is almost too easy to say. There was so much scope. Let's go with Anne of Green Gables. Scope for imagination in them. Like, you could go in many different directions. You could go very literal, but you could also go, very, what does this mean? And take other meanings from it, or a combination of both, right? Something's happening in these photos, and you're writing the story that sort of matches, but doesn't have to be 100% what the story is. So yeah, so it for me it was sort of the hardest part for me was sticking to the word count, not necessarily the getting inspiration from the photos, which were as I said,